What's up, guys? It's JZNES back again with another video. Today we're talking some Silent Hill 2, a video that I should have had made about 8 weeks ago, but more on that later, or at a different video, really. I'm not really going to get into that in this video, but I'll give you the short Cliff Notes version, just throwing it all out there. I was about 10 weeks ahead on videos at the time of recording. That was like it was like the Kirby Dream Land 3 video, if I remember correctly, or whatnot, or like the one after that or something, that I had done, probably about 2 months ago, and then up until like Silent Hill or whatever, and then some things happened, and I got a bit sidetracked, so I'm going to go into that in a different video, though. But it's worth mentioning that this game took me way longer to complete than is necessary. And I think part of that was, and of course, as soon as I start fucking recording, here he comes. Come on, get in here. As soon as I start talking. I think part of that is the fact that this is one of those games that I've always just had this like hang up with. I think it's part of it's like because everyone is like so big on this game and everyone's saying it's so much better than the original and it's like this ultimate classic of horror games or whatever, and it's super hyped up. Like, this is like the best horror game, it's the greatest horror experience and all this, so psychological horror and all this shit. And it's like, I never really thought that about the game. I mean, I played it a little bit back in the day, pretty much kind of right after, not right after, but a little bit after I played Silent Hill 1 there, probably like a year or so after that. I had played Silent Hill 2 and 3 there. I never beat 3. I did beat 2 back in the day, although I got the water ending, which is like the worst one. So I felt really ripped off by that, but of course I just went online and like looked up the real endings or whatever. This time I got the Leave ending, which I was going for the Maria ending, but that didn't really pan out for some reason. And I noticed she was like part of the final boss. I don't remember if that's how that worked. I thought there was like a second form to the final boss, which might also be a thing that I missed. So I don't know. That's just was my experience this time around. But this is one of these games that I've had this kind of roadblock with for a while. Maybe just because it's been so overhyped and because I don't quite sit on that level of hype with it. But having played it this time and having played most of it today, realistically, because I probably put in about 5 or so of the 8 hours that I needed for the playthrough today. And then the other days was getting through the beginning, which I think is probably, like a lot of people say, the weakest part of the game, because it's just a lot slower and a lot less impactful than the later part of the game. And you're just kind of weak and you don't have a lot of the stuff you have later. Although there is a lot of good puzzly elements in like the apartment building and like that earlier part of the game. There's a lot of more exploratory parts with the little town area there. But I think that's what the game was kind of missing a little bit. They did have a big explorative town part later on, but you only do that like maybe twice. And then there's like a lot of just running in a straight line. I mean, I think they did that a little bit in the first game. This game did it like really excessively. I feel like they were going more for atmosphere here than for like, I don't know, like gameplay or whatever like the first game was going for. But there was still a lot of gameplay as well. I just think it was more well balanced in the first game. And I'm a little biased, I get it. Like, that first game is what I grew up with, and that's the game that still scares me. That's kind of the other thing about this game. I'm not really super scared by it. There was a part where they, like, take all your stuff away near the end there, and I'm like, oh, this is a cool concept, and then you really didn't do much with that. There are, like, enemies and stuff in that part, but it's, like, they're pretty easy to run by kind of thing. So, yeah, like, it's really not that bad in terms of being scary. Actually, one of the cool things later on was I got the big giant knife thing that the pyramid heads have or whatever, um, and there's these like, I don't know, they're like these like rectangular like kind of enemies. You fight one as like a boss. Angela like calls her dad or whatever, so maybe it was her dad. I don't know. There's a lot of like interpretation stuff you got to do with Silent Hill 2 as well. So yeah, like, so you fight these things as a boss, or like maybe like an hour before you fight these things as like regular enemies in the hotel, and there's like 2 or 3 of them just like running around there, and I don't know if I had the giant knife in the original one. That would have made it pretty easy, but I think I did, actually. I did have that. Why didn't I just use that the first time? That would have been super easy. I didn't know about it. But then I used it on the hotel ones later, and it just took about 1 hit. And I'm like, oh, this is perfect. Like, this is great. So it's just like, that kind of shit. It makes you feel really powerful, because those are like some of the strongest enemies in the game. You just take them out 1 hit. It's super easy. Now, of course, I was playing on easy, because there's an easy combat setting, and then there's an easy riddle setting. So there's a riddle thing that makes the puzzles harder, and then there's a combat thing which makes the combat harder or easier. And I think that's pretty cool. I think that's a good way of going about things, and there's different solutions for the different riddles on the different difficulties. I think that's really clever. That's really smart. They should do that in more stuff, you know? Which they don't do. So yeah, I think that's a good thing. Definitely adds some replay value and makes it so you don't necessarily just know all the solutions right off the bat or whatnot. So that's good. And so yeah, so that's good. I liked that. But it's just one of these games where maybe it was just the beginning that kind of threw me off there, and maybe like really not want to like invest my time into the game or whatnot, but I just had this like struggle to like go back to it a lot. And I mean, there was a whole separate reason for that as well, but at the same token, I could have been putting a lot of time into Silent Hill 2, and then, you know, all the other games that I need to be putting time into for the channel, but I just didn't do that. So I lost all of my lead on those games. I guess I got like a 2-week lead now, which I'm just gonna have to use to make another 10-week lead if I can, I guess. But yeah, so I just, it's one of these games that I just, every time I go back to it, there's always long gaps between when I play it. So effectively, there was probably like a 6-week gap or something between when I last played it and today. And I finally just like sat down today and I was like, all right, well, I'm going to do some of this at least, you know. And that's the other thing is like when I play these games like this, I want to like sit down and invest a lot of time into them. But when I don't have all the time to invest into them, or I don't have the energy to invest the time into it, it becomes a whole problem. And so, you know, yeah, it took me a long time to beat this game that should effectively have taken me not long at all. Like, I've been just cranking out the games, but you know, that's another thing. Part of it could be like some burnout coming in, you know, so I guess I'm getting into all of that here in this video a little bit, but it's like I want to make a whole video kind of expounding upon all of that and really give a good explanation of all of that. But it's not that I don't like playing the game, but at first I didn't. You know, like I was like not that eager to go into it each time. But this time, I guess I was having a better time with the game, and I was enjoying it more than I did like last time I played through, or what, or last time I did a play session for this time of playing the game, if that makes sense. I don't mean like last time when I played it like 10 years ago or whatever. But God, it would have been longer than 10 years ago. It probably would have been like 14 years ago. God, that's so long ago. What the fuck? That's so crazy. Like 13 years ago, maybe, I think. God, that's insane. It was the last time I picked up this game. And that says a lot. I mean, the only reason I was even like, oh, I need to go back to this one is because I also want to do Silent Hill 3 because I know I haven't heard like the best things about that one, but like that's another one that I just really have always had on the list to play. That was kind of like the original backlog because I've had this copy for a while and just sitting here like haunting me like you need to play me, or whatever. So I remember playing some of it back in the day. I remember there being a few like really hard parts or whatever. So we'll see how that all holds up, but that's what I'm anxious to get to because it's kind of like an actual sequel to the first Silent Hill, whereas this game's like a side story. It's a separate thing. It's its own thing, So, but Silent Hill 1 is like a top tier game for me. It's like one of my favorite games. That is my favorite horror game, as far as I can remember from the list. I think that it was ranked as my top horror game. I can't think of what else would be above that. It's certainly still the scariest game that I've played, but I don't find Silent Hill too scary, and I think that's kind of disappointing to me. I think that's another reason that it's kind of a letdown. But it's interesting because Silent Hill 2 is going for a different thing, It's going for more of its characters and its atmosphere and that kind of stuff. And in that regard, a lot of the dialogue feels kind of weird, which is funny to say because the original game was a few years before this, 98 or 99? I think it was actually 99. This game was in 2001. Yeah, 99. And they already had the sequel cranked out by 2001 or 2. It said 2001 in the credits, so I gotta imagine that's when the sequel was cranked out. That's only a few years later. In terms of like graphical leap and stuff, it's astounding. It's like it looks so much better. In a sense, I mean, I still like the atmosphere and the charm of the original aesthetic better, but I do think the leap in technology and graphics is just like insane. And Konami, of course, they made Metal Gear Solid 2 as well, around the same time, and it's like they were just like they had the graphical capability down at the beginning of this new system. It was kind of insane, honestly, that they could even do that as well as they did. I mean, I think it's a really good looking game, and especially me playing it on the emulator and whatnot there. It still had kind of like a fuzzy grain to it, and there was a problem with the cutscenes where they were different. The cutscenes that were like not the in-game rendered cutscenes they had all sorts of distortion and whatnot. It's really kind of a problem, but I didn't really know how to fix it, so I just kind of bared with it, and it worked out fine. I ended up watching some of it on YouTube too to just kind of like see the better quality version of it. Sometimes they would cut in again to like being better and stuff, but it was a little bit distracting. But and in terms of the characters and stuff, I like the characters. I like what their journey and their kind of story is. There's more to these characters than there was in the original game, but in the original game it was more just like, here's our main protagonist character and it's what he's struggling with and he's dealing with, and they do that in this game as well with James Sunderland there, your new character, going after his wife. I just feel like also the prospect of the original game going after your lost kid was more interesting in a sense. In this game, it's more like you're going after your dead wife and trying to figure out if she's still alive. But it's like, that kid was alive in that game, and she ran off or whatever, and you're actively trying to save her from all this fucked up shit. And I just think that's very compelling, and I think there's a lot of great moments in the first game that are really good emotional beats to that story. Or just like really drive home the horror aspect of like through you being concerned about your daughter, like when she calls you on the phone or whatever, whoever calls you on the phone in that one building as you're like about to walk out of the door and you hear this phone call and you hear her voice on there, Stuff like that's just really terrifying. Like there's not moments like that in this game, as far as I'm concerned. There's not a lot like that. Or the moment when she shows up on all those TV screens in the mall area or whatever in the original game. Stuff like that's really like chilling, and it really like you just you get that like anxiety and that dread about all of that. It's not really a lot like that in this game. It's like more like, wow, look at these fucked up people and all the shit that they're dealing with. And that's great, that's they're trying to tell a compelling story, but it's just not the same Silent Hill experience. It's a whole different thing. And for that different thing, it's pretty good at what it's doing. I'm just saying that's not what really I was expecting from a Silent Hill sequel, I suppose. It's different than my expectations. That's fine. That's great. If they made every game that I expected them to make, then we'd have Tomba 3. That would probably be pretty good, but hey, maybe it would have sucked. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Point is, it was different than what I expected, and that was just a little off-putting to me, I think, last time I played it. And then this time, I appreciated it more, but there's still a lot of flaws, really, I guess, just really when comparing it to the first game. For me, it just doesn't hold up quite as well as that game. But it holds up in a different way with its storytelling and its characters and all that. I think that's the more compelling aspect of this game. I still prefer that in the original, even. So it's just kind of this doesn't stack up to the first game, but it's still a good thing in its own regard. Now, the gameplay and whatnot is very similar to the first game. They've made some improvements to it, but a lot of like the walking and that kind of stuff feels fairly similar. You still have those sort of same walking controls and like the camera angles and all of that. You're still heavily encouraged to use your melee items. Because I gathered up a bunch of ammo, and then I used it all at one point, and then it's like, alright, well, I guess they don't want me to use my ammo. So then I just start using the melee weapons, which really suck, because I missed this steel pipe. So there's a whole thing. There's a steel pipe that's in this car. I found it the first time I went through that area. Great. Cool. Upgrade to the wooden plank, because the wooden plank sucks. Great. It's a little bit better than the wooden plank, but I used it for most of the game, so it was kind of important that I get this steel pipe. Well, I go through this section, and then, of course, right after that, you run into Maria, and it's an escort mission section. So if she dies, which only takes a few hits, then you're just kind of screwed, and you start that section over. Okay, great. Well, on the repeat of that section, the one repeat I had to do, Maria, she was fine, but I was more focused on getting through that part, and I forgot to grab the steel pipe, and I'm like, God damn it. So I had to do the whole hospital section without the steel pipe, and then you do go back through that area again in the other world, so I was like, shit, is it gonna not be there, and I'm gonna be just fucked? Luckily, it was there. I do commend them for that, for not blocking off that area and just making it so you can never get that item. And I would have hated that. I thought there was a third item too as well, but I don't remember, like a third melee item that wasn't the giant knife or whatever, but I might have missed that one, whatever. I did find all the guns, the shotgun, the handgun, the hunting rifle. They're really not out of the way this time like they were in the first game. Not that they were out of the way in the first game, but the hunting rifle is just kind of sitting over there if you just kind of miss it, like it did like in my first playthrough. Then, it's like you just kind of miss it, and that's it. But it's really apparent where it is in this game, and I don't think you can really miss it, as far as I'm concerned. And I was more following a walkthrough this time, too. I wasn't really doing that in my original playthrough, so I just kind of wanted to get through the game. I didn't follow the walkthrough for the whole time. I just did when I kind of got stuck. I would systematically check all the rooms, and then I would be like, oh, okay, so what did I miss, basically, from the walkthrough if I couldn't figure it out, kind of thing. So, yeah, so there's that. One of the, auditory things I didn't like as much was the radio static was, sounded more like static now. It's like, alright, cool, that's probably how it's supposed to sound. But I kind of like the original game where it was less of a static and it was more of like a weird ambience sort of thing that you would hear. It was way more freaky than just radio static or whatever. So yeah, I really didn't like that quite as much as the first game either. So it's just a little thing, but it's just like, it's just it didn't I didn't like that as much. So but I do like how they kind of they have the technology now to have like a character kind of come along with you for quite a ways. So you get a lot of sections where Maria's there, and some of them are escort mission stuff. Spoilers for Silent Hill 2, I suppose. There's one part where she kind of dies to this pyramid head, and I kept thinking like, well, but she's an ending in the game. How is she gonna die? So I thought I kept doing that wrong. So I did that part like 3 or 4 times before I like looked it up that she's supposed to die there because she just keeps coming back because this is Silent Hill. So yeah, it's like, one of these things where it's more about like these characters dealing with their like emotional baggage and their pasts and whatnot. This Silent Hill is more like a almost like a hell for these characters, to where they need to deal with all of their stuff before they can kind of move on. And I think that's kind of what the game is about. But there's people who broke that down way more than I have. And having played the game now, again, I would like to finally start watching some of that content and really experiencing what people have to say about the game now that I'm not fucking 14 and, or probably 16 or whatever. However the hell old I was back then. And, like, I'm just like, whatever, like, I don't get all this deep character lore building and stuff, like, and I still don't understand everything about the game, obviously, but I get a lot more, but it's weird because the dialogue, like I was saying earlier, kind of still feels weird and stilted in a way. It's just probably up to the translation or something, but the original game actually had, like, dialogue that I could understand. It was never like that in a sense, but they weren't always talking about emotional character stuff either. It was more like, we need to go here, do this thing, and like, what about Cheryl or whatever. It's like, it's like, okay, or some like prophecy shit like about the demons or whatnot. But I don't know, it had its own way of doing things, its own charm. So but yeah, so I like Silent Hill 2, but it's like I just don't like it as much as the original, and I think that's what it comes down to. The gameplay and the character development and all that is really solid. The graphically it looks a lot better, but I don't really prefer the aesthetic to the first game. I think a lot of the charm of the first game is the unknown. They don't really have a lot of that here. But I guess something about those more rudimentary or more simplistic graphics really gets your imagination going all the more than when the graphics are better and stuff. And maybe that's why horror games aren't exactly as scary anymore. But also they can do more now, so you would think they would be scarier. I don't know. I probably just haven't been like playing the right horror games to be scary. But that's the thing. Like, I think that was why the original didn't grasp me so much. The original hours of this game, I should say, didn't grasp me so much, is because I wasn't very scared, and I was just more bored from not being scared, as this is a horror game, and I was expecting some horror stuff. But the original hours are more about setting up the town and the characters and what James is going through in his head, trying to find his dead wife and all that. Establishing everyone and the setting and whatnot, and kind of laying some seeds for the future of the game there. So, yeah, I think that's more what the beginning of the game is about. So it's kind of a slow burn, and I would say by the end of the game, like maybe the second half of the game, it really does pay off in a sense, and it does, the game does get better, but I still just preferred the style of the original game. And those locations were more kind of iconic to me, I guess, and they're just more interesting to me, I guess, than these locations. But this is more of a personal story as well. So I think that's another element to this that you have to consider, when you're looking at this. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm not going to give the game a bad rating or anything. I just don't like it as much as everyone else. I'm not on the hype train like everyone else. Like, this is the greatest horror game of all time. I still think it's a really solid game, but it has its problems at the same token. And maybe there's a lot of aspects that just haven't aged as well. And I think a lot of like the bizarre stuff from the original game wasn't really here. This game doesn't really feel like weird or out there. But like in the original game, I love how like the whole final dungeon is just like mishmash shit from like everywhere that you've been, but it's like all rearranged and stuff, so it kind of like throws you off your guard. And like they just do all this sort of random spooky stuff, just out of nowhere. Like this game doesn't have a lot of that kind of stuff. It's like it's just not as charming in that sense. But I do think that it's a pretty good game. It's a good game. It's not an amazing game. It's not a great game. It's a good game. And I do like it. I just don't love it, like I do the original game there. Because it doesn't scare me. And yeah, like I just don't feel that much tension from the gameplay and whatnot. So it's kind of a weaker aspect for me. I didn't talk about the soundtrack yet. I was kind of waiting for that one track to come on. But there's a really famous track from this game. And I couldn't find like a soundtrack. Actually, this one is a playlist soundtrack, isn't it? Let's see if we can find that. There's a really like famous track in this game. Maybe it's already played or whatever. I don't know. Right, this is it. This is that track, yeah. I just needed to give it a little longer. I hear this track in, like, YouTube videos and stuff, like, just randomly, and I was always wondering, what the fuck game is this from? And I'm like, I know it's Silent Hill 2. What track is it from that game? Just in case anybody else is wondering, it's called Lost Innocence from Silent Hill 2. So there you go. That's the mystery of that one solved. But I love this song. It's so great. It's so perfectly, like, ambient and whatnot. And honestly, I think it reflects what the game... The level of hype this game could have been is, like, portrayed in this song. But, like, it doesn't get there, you know what I'm saying? Like... So... But yeah, but it's not a bad game. I used to kind of... like think, oh hey, it's kind of overrated. It probably is a little bit overrated. Like let's be real here. But at the same token, it's not as bad as I would. I never thought it was bad, but like it's not bad at any means. So it's pretty solid, and it's not gonna get a 10 out of me or anything, but it'll get like an 8. It's just a solid 8 out of 10 kind of game, Maybe even that's giving it too much praise. Maybe I'm going to give it a 7.7. Nah, I'm going to give it an 8. I already said 8. Like a high 7 to an 8. Let's just go with that. We'll just be to cover our bases here. I liked it, but there's problems. So maybe a 7. I don't know. That's about what a 7 is, right? Like a C effort. So, I don't know. Somewhere to a 7 to an 8. It's hard. My feelings on this game are complicated, and I haven't made a video like this in 10 weeks, so I'm a little rusty on my grading scale there. But yeah. So, but you won't notice any difference because the videos are already made up until this point. So I mean, at least this one will come out. I don't think it's going to take me that much longer to beat Silent Hill 3, unless it's, like, super long or something. I hope it's another kind of, like, 8 to 10 hour game would be nice. So that was kind of the intention. As soon as I played Silent Hill, I'm like, I've got to play Silent Hill 2 and 3, because, like, when the hell else am I going to play those? I'll play those on a different Halloween review, like, okay, I just gotta do it. I'm probably gonna get kind of burned out by it, but I'm gonna do it. But I guess that kind of 8 week gap there like made it so I wasn't so burned out on it. We'll see when I get to Silent Hill 3 how that all turns out. Um, but I think that's the thing about the game is that it's a pretty compelling game to the right people, but to me, I find the first game more compelling, and I can sit down and marathon the first game and just play it straight through. This game, I can't really do that until maybe the second half of the game. And even then, I was really just trying to. It's not that I wasn't having like a good time with the second half of the game. It's like I was really trying to get that done also for the review, you know? Just saying. But I also did have a good time with my second or third playthrough session on this game compared to the first two where I was more like dreading that the game was just going to be like kind of like tedious and just kind of boring the whole way through, which is not how I feel about the game anymore. I think that it's not those things. I just think there's some rough patches and it has a few problems that, you know, like that kind of weigh it down. And God, let's not even talk about the HD versions, right? Like there's so many other problems with those alone. There's whole videos about that. Luckily, I'm not playing those ports. I'm playing the regular originals, you know, the PS2 games. That's why I'm doing the emulation as well. I would just get that version if it was any good, but it's notoriously bugged to shit, and everyone hates it. And the fog and stuff is worse, and just all sorts. The voice acting's all different. I mean, I love Troy Baker, but he's not meant to play James Sunderland or whatever, so not into it. Uh, and yeah, so I'm looking forward to Silent Hill 3, and that'll probably be the next review, since that's technically a gem from the backlog, or hopefully it's going to be a gem from the backlog and not go on the dud from the backlog list of like one game so far, or two games, or how many are on there? Maybe one or two so far. So, yeah, but Silent Hill 2, you know, I have some mixed feelings on it, but it's overall a pretty solid game. But I don't love it as much as the original. That's what it just comes down to. So, yeah, there's not much else to say. So until next time, this has been JZNES saying keep it classic. Stick around for more reviews, underrated games, and I'll see you guys in the next one. JZ